back to part 2 of our master class of modeling a T-Rex head. We're going to jump right back into it with grabbing parts of our dinosaur and working on her eye ridges. And we're just modeling and slowly shaping our dinosaur until she gets to be close to where we want her to be. We'll grab the draw tool. It's a really efficient and fast way to build up your model. That way you don't have to grab a whole bunch of different parts. You can just draw it on there. We'll fatten up her eyelid some. And the more you draw to shape your dinosaur, the closer you're going to be to the final result. And it also helps you see where some future detail is going to be. And that's really important here, because this is where you set up what her scaling is going to look like, the size of her scales, and all of that other future stuff. You're setting a blueprint, really, of where your detailing is going to be. So that's why I like using draw to flesh out the rest of the dinosaur instead of using just grab. Right now I use grab for her base shape underneath. And we're not doing too big of movements anymore. We are just doing small, tiny adjustments, because that's all she needs. And if I need to reshape something, remember, smooth is your best friend. Holding down shift while you grab will help round out and shape up your model much easier, faster, and efficient than just using grab. We'll realign her profile to our reference model, our reference photo. And keep in mind where you have your cursor. Pay close attention. It's easy to grab something you didn't mean to and move it around. And if you do, that's okay too, because you can hit Control Z to undo any oopsie daisies. And our current face count is at about 450,000 polygons. So right now is not the time to add the superfine detail. Right now is the best time just to get that base shape taken care of. Your base shape is like your scaffolding. It's what you're going to put everything else on. Let's go ahead and go to edit mode, hit A, and we will subdivide. And your subdivide should be in your quick links. If you don't have that set up, go check out the basic tutorial on this, and I'll show you how to get your quick links set up. Now we went from 450,000 faces to 1.8 million. And like I showed you in the first video, my system setup, I can get up to successfully about 35 million faces and still be able to sculpt relatively smoothly with no lag. And if your system can't handle that, just subdivide up to a good face count that your system can handle, because there's nothing worse than trying to model and refine detail and there's nothing but lag. It's the worst. It's the absolute worst. But with this higher face count that we have now, our model will become smoother and look a lot cleaner and neat. We have a little nook here from when we were mirroring and modeling our head. But I don't think that's going to cause us too much of an issue. I'm going to go to 3D print and make manifold just to see if that'll close up any gaps that we have. If you don't have that 3D print add-on into your toolbar, again, I went over that in the other tutorials, so go check that out and see how to add your add-ons in. This is a master class, so by now you should have most of these add-ons and a good understanding of Blender. So we keep trucking along, building up depth, structure, and I always like to draw something on and then smooth it out, draw it on and smooth it out. Especially here when we're getting our understructure completed. So when you draw, go with the direction and shape of the face that you already have. Try to go along the natural lines and curvature of her head, because again, this will help you model out your scaling structure later on. And the great thing about modeling and art, especially with dinosaur heads or anything else you want to model, is I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out at the end. Otherwise, I would just move everything exactly where it needed to be and then start detailing it. But I don't know. That's why we do all this work beforehand, to get something special and something unique. Because your dinosaur should look close to mine, but you're a different artist. You've got different skills and styles. So while it should look similar, it should still be notably different. And that's what makes your dinosaur yours and my dinosaur mine. So keep adding along. Draw, smooth, draw, smooth. And the shape will come together. Hit Control to get out the ear, Control to define the jaw. And for these saggy parts, it's good to hit Control and take away some of that meat down below it, and that gives it a little bit of a hangy look. Then we'll go into the side view and try to mirror a little bit of what our reference photo is doing. And you draw in X-ray, and just trust that what you're doing to your model is what you're actually doing, even though you can't really see it. So this will give you a little guide, and it gets pretty close. So we build it up nice and fat towards the skin overhang, and we start thinning it out as it travels up along her neck. You can have as many folds in here as you want. I like a good amount. Oops. There we go. And if you're using your Wacom tablet or any other type of tablet, the harder you press, the more your tool will function. So you lightly touch it, you'll get small, tiny little valleys. You press down pretty hard, you should be getting good deep cuts in your model. And we'll start refining these shapes as well. I do a scratch method. I don't do a hard line from where I start to where I finish. Scratch method works well for me. If you can just do it in one go, good for you. But I can't. Dexterity in my hands kind of sucks. So this is how I do it. I do a little sketch, and it works because nothing needs to be perfect or a smooth line. This isn't a cartoon. We're trying to do a natural looking animal here. And these lines that we're putting on her snout will also help us figure out future details. Same with her ridge. We'll add a few here just to see what they start looking like. We'll start getting some depth in her eyes. We'll kind of sketch out where her lips are going to be. And use our reference to sketch out some of these other detailing features. And when you come back, all those lines you just made should still be there. And we'll kind of start refining some. This is where I hit Control to get a sharp edge with your draw sharp. If you use just the draw tool, it make a kind of like a ball of clay. But when you use your draw sharp, it makes a nice thin hard line that lets you have that immediate and fast detail in there. And again, I'm just kind of sketching out the shape of her face. And this does two things. This helps me figure out where the scales are going to go, the orientation of the scales, and the size of the scales. So having some of these divot lines is always good practice to have with models that are going to have a lot of detail and I guess that's it. I guess just a lot of detail. It also gives you some subsurface scattering going on. So if you do have a really big mole or wart or just a scale, it'll have some of these underlines that you've been working on beforehand. It'll give you some of that definition, which is always nice. And we're just scraping along the bottom, giving that leathery look. Scraping along the bottom gives you, lets you see any imperfections you might see, and it'll get rid of them. And if they're still there and apparent, then you know that's somewhere you need to work on. So look around your model, see if there are any spots that you want to play with. We'll go to our grab. We'll start moving in things nice and easy. Giving it a defined look. We're going to subdivide everything again from 1.7 million polys, and we are up to 7 million. As you can see, those polys got a lot smaller. They all subdivided. So we'll go back into sculpt and keep going. And if your system can't hold up with this, you can go to decimate modifier and decimate it down to a poly count that your system can handle. But if you're using Blender, probably means that you got really good setup, so you should be able to handle this amount right here. And we'll go through and we'll smooth off everything, get that base shape right where we want it. And now that when we go into draw, everything that we draw will be a lot smoother and looking nicer. So we can start working on some of those details that's going to stay with the model. We'll define some of our guidelines for our future scales. And this is going to be a border of where the really small scales and her bigger scales are going to be. And on the inside is where I'm going to define some bigger folds to give her a more unique look. And you can put them wherever you want and have as many wrinkles and folds as you want. You don't even have to have any in there at all. The younger your T-Rex is going to be, the less wrinkly she's going to be. So you don't have to have as many as me. Mine will be a full-grown adult. So there's going to be a lot more detail to play with on my sculpt. But just follow along with me. Do the best you can. And here I'm going to want a little bit of an overhang over her eyelid because I think it'll look neat. So I'm going to dig in deep and build in over it. And this is the time that you want to add your more refined subsculpture. Yeah, that's right. Not the super fine details yet. That'll be the next step. But this is where all your fine details will finally sit. And one of the great things about dinosaurs and just modeling animals in general is you don't have to worry about things being absolutely perfect, skin being absolutely perfect, because there's a lot of detail in their skins, and you can hide anything you want as you go along. So just have fun with it. You really can't do anything wrong here. And we'll go over, and what I'm doing is I'm just hitting shift to smooth out all of our polys from before. We do both sides. And we'll come back up to draw and work on her eye a little bit more. And remember to like this video and subscribe and hit that notification bell and comment down below on what you'd like to see more of. That really helps with the channel, and it helps me bring you more super duper content. And that's what I'm here for, so we can both do some art together and make amazing things. Because I like making amazing things, but I really like it when you make amazing things. So that's why we do this together. And here I've fixed the normals a little bit, so we're going to go back. Nope, I did not fix the normals. I'm going to wait for my system to catch up. Alright, we're going to go into edit mode here. I want really high definition around her eye, the rest of her skin. is almost good. We're going to be subdividing a little bit later, but the definition around her eye is going to be the highlight of this sculpt. So I'm going to change the select box to select circle. I'm going to go into X-ray and stay on the X-axis view. So when I select everything here around her eye, it's selecting everything on the other side of the sculpt as well. And this is where I want really high definition, really high detail. It's a really good trick to increase definition of just a small area while keeping relatively a low poly count. So you don't necessarily always want to subdivide your entire model if your entire model is going to have really high definition and high detail. And we increased our poly count to 8 million, and when we subdivide again, it's going to jump up to 14 million, and this is a really good spot for me. Again, if your system can't handle it, don't go up this far. If it can, then have at it. So now when we get into sculpt again, make sure to save your work, as I just did. Always save your work. Blender will autosave, but you could do a massive amount of work and then it could crash on you or something bad could happen. So always make sure you save every few minutes. I'll do my best to try to remind you. So what I should have done before was hit Shift A and apply all rotations, scales, all transformations. And what I'm trying to do here is correct the normals, because as I'm making these scales here, you'll see that my brush is a negative space when it needs to be positive. And if that's a problem that you're having, is because your normals are backwards, like mine are. My normals are facing inwards. They need to be facing out. And I fix that a little bit later on, only because that's when I learn about it. But for now, what I'm doing is adding the really fine details. You can see that it's nice and smooth, and that's the level of detail that I want. And we zoom out a little bit just to take a look to see how well we can see it from a little bit of a distance. And it's a good indicator of that I got the right size down. And now that I know I've got the right size, I'm going to add a little bit more details back to these keratin scars that are along her eye bridge. And give her a more defining angry look, because that's how I want mine to look. Nice and angry. And I'll use draw sharp, and we will start forming out some of these bigger scales. We'll be defining these back scales back here. Now this is when you want to start getting closer to the actual detail that you want. Yes, you can fix it later, but everything that you were kind of just messing with earlier was setting you up for right now. This is when you start getting that, defining exactly where you want all your final layers to be. As you see, I make a big scale for her lip, and then I add in everything in between. So as I get closer to that one, I can start making them a little bit larger to the size that I want. That's another reason why I skip up. I've said it before. That's why I skip around. if I started off at the big scale right there at her cheek and then worked back, I could have a totally different set of definitions, and it may not be the right size, and then I have to go back and fix it. If you find a good spot, like back here, and you know that's the size scale that you want because it looks good, then you can fill in everything in between and you'll have a lot less mistakes. And keep in mind, as you zoom in and out, your cursor size stays the same. So if you zoomed in really close right now with that cursor size, you'd have very small impressions and divots. As you can see here, they're a little bit tinier. And as you zoom out, those divots would be a lot larger because that's what the cursor area would be covering on your sculpt. And I just make some more paths, and then I put the scales along that path. And as you can see, when we fill it up, it will look natural. There'll be a little bit of form to it, but it's not going to look like it's been rubber stamped. Continue going with her nasal ridge. Now I have a problem. I tend to go smaller than I should. It's something I'm working on. I could have done these a little bit bigger, but they work for me. They work for the sculpt, and it turns out okay. So don't be afraid to go too big, because the bigger detail that you're working on, the less work you have to do. Instead of defining 50 scales, you're only defining 10. We'll get rid of this little booger back here by shift and smooth. Because back at this back ridge, when I print this off, that's the area of the foam when I do finally cast her. That's where the foam of her lips are going to be. So I don't need to do much detail. And here I'm kind of guessing about the size of the teeth, because I want to see if I got my depth right. And this is a good time to remind you to subscribe, because I will be doing high definition teeth in the future. So if you want to see how to do that, then you're gonna have to subscribe to the channel. That's all there is to it. So we'll keep going, working around her nostril, finding little paths to add our detail to. I call these beauty marks. They're just random scales that go around her face that aren't going to necessarily be the same type of scale that matches her whole body. They're going to be defining features. So I like to throw them around randomly, and then I work my scaling around that. We'll build up this ridge. We'll start giving in her skin some of that underlayer definition. And again, you want to go with the shape of her head. So you fan out around her eye ridges, come back in towards the middle. And remember here we're hitting control with our draw brush, and that gives us nice smooth transitions instead of using draw sharp, where it's in the name of the tool. It does it sharp. There's sharp definition. So as you see, we get really smaller here, and this is why we subdivided the eye area, because of the entire model. This area is going to have the smallest amount of scales, and once you get one row in, then just fill them up. Make sure they're not perfectly in a line. Offset them just slightly. And it's a little bit of work, but the detail that comes out of it is pretty fantastic. And she starts looking really good right away. Now this is the detailing that's going to stay till the end of your model. This is that hard work that you don't want to have to undo over and over. That's why we just went through several hours of making sure that she was the right shape before we started adding all of this detail. So I can't tell you how many times I just wanted to skip to this part, only to find out that the 5 or 6 different steps that we've already taken, I skipped, was a bad idea, because then I had to erase all the detail and then reshape her eye, reshape her face, and it was just a pain. And I want you to avoid that pitfall, which is why we're going through this entire process together. And on some of these beauty marks, we'll increase our cursor size a little bit and give them some height to it. And not just the shape, but also the height of these scales will help you determine the height of other scales. Everything we're doing is for a reason. And we go from big, further up, down to small. And the reason for this is because her eye blinks. There's a lot of muscle underneath. She moves her eyes around. So if she had big old thick skin around her eyes, she wouldn't be able to move them as well, and that's just not how nature works. And this is an important transition part, so take note on how you size everything between her eye to her snout. Get yourself those guidelines and roadmaps in before you start putting in that high detail. And I know these are going to be small, so we'll just start adding them. And you're going to get yourself into a groove and just flow with it. Whatever feels natural, whatever feels comfortable for you, just keep going. And before you know it, you're going to have a lot of definition, and your dinosaurs are going to start coming to life. And this is that overhang that we started working on a few minutes ago. We're going to add to that ridge and take away from underneath. But that ridge also has to have detail. Every square inch of her is going to have something. Don't leave any part of her blank. even if it's a part that you think nobody will see, it's just a good thing, good habit to get into. If you're going to detail something and put in all this effort, make sure you get every surface, whether you can see it or not. And we're just going to keep filling in the gaps. And I'll tell you what I'm thinking as I do this. I know that we are going to be 3D printing her, so I take a lot of that into account because she's going to be molded and cast into rubber, and then she's going to be painted. So I need to make sure that the height and depth, basically the contrast of what we're working on here, is very high, because that paint, the post-processing of the model, is going to take away some of that detail, and all this work that we're doing here could basically be erased because of the post-processing, and we don't want that. So if you are going to print yours out and paint it, turn it into a resin model or a foam model, just be mindful of that when you are doing your detail. If you're just going to 3D print, then maybe you don't need to have the contrast as high as we're eventually going to do here. But when you're modeling, don't just think of what's in front of you. Be planning ahead on what you're going to end up using her for. I had this little ridge, so then I decided this is where I'm going to start a line of scales. And none of this was planned. I didn't know that these are exactly where I was going to put these things. Everything happens organically. And the more organic and natural and free-flowing you can create your animal model, the more realistic it's going to look. Remember, take your time. There we go. She's already got a good look to her. And this is just one of the steps. We will be coming back and going over every scale again, refining, detailing, making it better. So the amount of detail, amount of work you want to put into it is up to you. But this is a master class, so we are going to be putting a lot of effort and a lot of work into it. Either way, if you end at this step before we get into the higher resolution, you're still going to have a beautiful model and something you can be proud of, something you can work with, something you can print out on your own and have on your shelf and still be amazed with. I'll work out these keratin features. more. And we'll work on these transition lines. So when we're done with this, we're going to call it a day. Y'all have done a really good job. Thanks for sticking with me. Again, I'm going to try to get these out at least once a week for you. Make sure you like the video, subscribe, and comment down below because it helps me give you better content. And that's what we're shooting for here, getting you better content. So I'll see y'all next time.